Hey mama, do you find yourself wishing you knew you were on the right path with your business? Or wanting to know how to do it all as a work-at-home mom and entrepreneur? If you struggle with imposter syndrome, mom guilt, or fear of failure, then you're in the right place. Hi, I'm Alexia, a Christian mindset coach, passionate about teaching moms how to renew their minds to find success both in business and motherhood. You can overcome the negative thoughts holding you back from fully stepping into your calling. I know what it's like to worry your business will never work, to feel mom guilt every time you work on your business, to realize your mindset is hindering you, but not knowing how to change it in a Christ-centered way. I created the Mom with a Calling podcast to teach you how to use the powerful combination of God's Word and proven mindset strategies to help you break free from negative, paralyzing thoughts and gain clarity and confidence to go where God is leading you. As you step out of the old way of thinking and into God's way, you'll find more peace, joy, and purpose. Pop in those earbuds and get ready to let God work in you so he can work through you. All right, welcome back to the Mom with a Calling podcast. Today, I have a special guest, Leisha Drews. She is a mom of three, an RN, an FDN-P, I don't know what that is, but you can let us know, and holistic hormone coach and host of the Happily Hormonal Podcast. I love that name. She brings a unique understanding of how our body systems work together and how stress on the body and mind impact our overall health. She believes that as women, we can have it all when it comes to health and motherhood, and helping women restore energy, balance hormones, and feel good in their bodies, again, is her passion. Hormone balance doesn't have to be overwhelming, and she is here to empower women to understand and trust their bodies, again, to create change for generations to come. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I always love talking about hormones, so this will be fun.
Yes. Well, we're going to talk about maximizing our productivity by aligning that with and understanding our hormone cycles, which is something that I've been interested in talking about for years. So I'm so glad that we're talking about it. But to get us started, can you just give us an overall understanding of why and how? And it's probably a really big question, but you can decide how to answer it. Why and how our hormone cycles would even have anything to do with our productivity?
Okay, so this is a great question, especially in the world we live in where I would say if I was just going to throw out a percentage, I say 90+% of women who are in their 30s have been on birth control either ever in their lives. Like most of us have been on birth control. If it was maybe a short time, I think that's a little more rare, but many women have been on birth control kind of a minimum of like 3 to 5 years. Some have been on it 10, 15 years. And this has completely disconnected us from our hormone cycles, because when you're on birth control, you have a very low level of synthetic estrogen and or progesterone in your system at all times that tells your brain, do not send the signals to my ovaries to ovulate, and you are not making any of your own hormones, basically. So that's a super oversimplification, but you're not making your own hormones. When you are disconnected from your hormone system, which is arguably what truly makes you a woman and what makes you different than a man throughout your cycle and throughout your life, you are have the same feelings, the same brain function. You're attracted to different people than you would be if you weren't on birth control. Like there's a huge part of our bodies as women that is connected to this hormone system. So I think that we have a really kind of like a disadvantage to some extent with just the amount of women who are on birth control and who have been on birth control and just maybe never even got connected with that part of their bodies in the first place. Now, I also think that there has been, I think it's changing a little bit, but there has been a ton of shame around periods, being a woman in general. Even just the way, we talk about our cycles. I think it's so common for it to be like, if someone very well-meaning, I don't mean this in a bad way, but it's like, oh, she's just PMSing, or, oh, she's moody, it must be her hormones. Like this is truly like the stigma that I'm trying to break. And in such a different way than like, modern feminism or like shaming men, like there's nothing about that. It's just, as women, we need to be connected to our femininity. We need to be connected to our cycles because it's a huge part of how God made us. And it makes a really big difference in how we show up in the world differently than men in such a powerful way, not in a better way or a worse way, but just like we were made male and female, we were made different. And even in a marriage relationship, a parenting relationship, like we need those differences. Like we need to have the, the steady and the firm and the, structure of masculinity. And we also need the soft and the loving and the more flowing part of us that's feminine. And honestly, in every single one of us, we need a little bit of both. But as women, when we are actually connected to our cycles, when we have natural cycles, we are in a better place to be able to experience that side of femininity. And so what do I actually mean by that? Well, when you go throughout your hormone cycle, there are changes in your brain that happen throughout estrogen and progesterone rising and falling. And some of those changes have to do with, obvious things like mood and PMS and things like that. But a lot of them are really positive. So we'll go through a whole menstrual cycle and I'll talk about those connections in your brain and how things change. But I think that I just want to make the point that we live in a world that kind of, it runs on a male schedule. It runs on a 24-hour cycle, which happens to be a male hormone cycle. And for good reason, for a long time, men were the ones like, making the money, making the schedules in corporate. Like there was a lot of years where that was the case. And so now that there's not, I'm not saying that companies should be run on a female hormone cycle because everybody's is different. That would be utter chaos. And if we understand our own, then we can lean into our strengths in different parts of our cycles and also, lean into where we need more grace and where we need more space in those other parts of our cycles.
Grace and space. Yes. So like you were saying, and that's a really good point about like it was designed around the male hormone cycle and all of that. And it's true that we, we talk about it in a negative way, even to ourselves. Like we don't want to admit when and I even when I talk to a friend, I'm like, it's that time of them. I won't even say it's like, I try to like gear away from it or something. But even in recent years, just among friends, being more willing to say this week is hard and sort of admitting it and then kind of noticing the pattern that I haven't just lost my mind. It's like this happens over and over. This is a connection to my body in some way. And I've never thought about the birth control effect, especially when, I was on birth control when I was like young and they'll do that. I don't think they'll do, but to like regulate cycles. It's not, and so it's like for years in those formative years, really, of understanding how you operate as a woman, you're missing out on that, like you're saying. And then during those times, at least that time for me was like super intense hustle time with like college and like everything's intense. And so you're running really hard. So like now in our 30s, trying to be at home, having your kids, things are slower, but you also want to work. Like we don't even know how to pay attention to what our bodies are needing, or like we're trying to still do the hustle and the run, but that's not the way we're operating. Our bodies aren't like that anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it's so true. I think that when we are put on birth control as really young women for multiple reasons, then we are disconnecting that hormone cycle. And we are essentially like, it honestly can stunt your development in a lot of different ways to be on birth control as such a young woman. And I think that it hasn't really been well researched, but I think that hopefully there will be more research coming up soon. And I do think that, a lot of the kind of like shame or like, hiding it, I'm not saying that you need to be like running out the door yelling like it's my period. Like everyone doesn't need to know. I'm not really a proponent for that. But I also think that like as I'm teaching my daughter's 10, like I've always just kind of like talked about it. It's just a normal thing. Like everyone who is a woman should have a period. And like even when we keep it secretive and we keep it like private and we want to say it's that time of the month or like Aunt Flo is here or whatever, like, you know what? Like I think we're kind of like leaning into that perception that it's like something gross or dirty or it's whatever. And I mean, I have 2 little boys as well, and like they love to talk about poop, right? So like that's gross. Like we don't need to be talking about it all the time. Like some things are private. But with that being said, like there is a time and a place, and especially when I'm teaching my daughter, like I don't want her to feel ashamed or feel like something's secretive or bad or like wrong about her body because she has a period when she gets there, because it's not. Like, it's absolutely not. And I think that keeps us from seeking help when our periods are not good, and just assuming that, oh, being a woman must just be gross and hard and terrible. And it's good to have, or like, it's normal to have bad periods. It's normal to have PMS. And it kind of feels like, something's inherently wrong with me because I have these cycles. And so I think that's why so many women love to be on birth control, and even like skip pill packs and things like that, or skip the placebo pills where like they don't have a period. It's like empowering in our society because we see it as a disability almost.
That's sad.
Yeah,
but,
it is sad.
But if you think about, yeah, but historically it makes sense because it's, yeah, it makes sense that there would be all these kind of negative things about it. And then it's an inconvenience. So like, and so if they can prevent that, then they get to just keep going on their merry way. So as you're talking about talking with your daughter, I was thinking, won't it be neat to see what differences it makes, years down the line? Like, does it matter? How does it change things? And it got me thinking, how did you, like, what's the backstory? I should actually say at the beginning, but like, what's the backstory of how you came into talking about this? Why hormones and things like that?
Yeah, such a good question. So I started off right out of high school, went into college to be a nurse, worked in the hospital for about 10 years. It was like 9.5 years when I quit at the hospital. And I just saw, essentially, there was a lot that I really loved about being a nurse. We helped a lot of people. I worked all over the hospital. I loved working in the emergency room, fully believe in the need for medical care. And we have a very strong system of sick care in our country. And I saw people come back sicker and sicker. And especially with things like things that were preventable, like heart disease and diabetes and COPD, which is a lung disease that typically comes from smoking. And I just saw people coming back sicker and sicker. And I'm like, we could help them more than this. Like, we could be telling them not to eat crap. We could be telling them, to actually stop smoking, to exercise. Like, and of course, like all those things were like kind of told to them. It was like, eat healthy, exercise, stop smoking. But like, everybody knows that, but also like, how do you actually do it? And like, what do you eat to eat healthy? And I really wanted to be able to help people before they got that sick. And so I had my own, my journey, my daughter's journey, becoming a mom, like all of these things really kind of like pushed me over into more of the crunchy space, and like learning more about nutrition and all, just all the things. And as I started to have my own journey, I was like, I want to help people with nutrition. Like, this is where I want to go. And so I looked at all these different programs. I found the FDN-P program that you had mentioned earlier. So it's functional diagnostic nutrition. And I loved that program because it taught me how to help people holistically with their health and nutrition, but it also allowed me to run functional lab work, which was something that I really wanted to do. And I loved having those numbers as a nurse, and I loved the science behind it. So that's what I went with. And when I came out of school, I was like, I can help everybody, right? And I did. I tried to help everybody, and I helped some people. But what I found out is I really loved working with women, and I really loved working with moms. And as I started to help women and moms, it became really apparent that hormones were a big issue. And I do focus on hormones, but in a very big picture way. So we're not just looking at your hormones and just trying to like fix these numbers on your hormones. Like, we're looking at, but why does your body not feel safe to make your hormones well? Why is your body not detoxing your hormones well? What do we need to look at as well? Like, it's going to be gut health. It's going to be nourishment. It's going to be minerals. It's going to be stress. It's all the things. But hormones are kind of the tip of the iceberg, where women are like, oh, my periods are terrible. I know it has to be my hormones, right? And so it's like kind of the entryway to being able to heal things underlying in the body, so that you can have truly what I consider normal is a period that does not throw off your life. So you don't have terrible PMS. You don't have fatigue. You don't have tons of mood swings. Your period doesn't hurt. It's not super heavy. You can go about your life, and you do bleed, but like, that's kind of all that's happening. And I know that that's not a lot of women's experience, but it's very possible. And that is what your body is actually supposed to do.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I was wondering if any part of this, like if there was a part of it where, sort of like, realizing that I mean, it sounds like you did, but like realizing how much it affects, like how if you had it something different, like your life would have been different basically. And like you said, like we will accept, like it's pretty much the only thing I feel like hormonally that we're like, oh, obviously it's hormones because my cycle's off, my period's weird or whatever. Like that's like a big, that manifestation of it. And then we're like, okay, now I can look at hormones. But otherwise, I feel like hormones they feel like, because unless you get the lab work, it's sort of like, it's like it's fake or something. It's not really happening in our bodies because you can't really tell. I mean, there are things that if you know what to look for, but I feel like the everyday woman is not recognize that except for through her period. And then to hear, like you said some things in there about like your stress and your mood and your mood and detox and all of that. Like we don't even realize the impact that it has on all the other things that we're struggling with that are connected.
Yeah, it's all connected. And really, hormone imbalances are a manifestation of your body not feeling safe for some reason, because there's too much inflammation, because there's too much stress, because there's too many toxins, because you're not detoxing. Like there's multiple reasons. And the beauty of really like balancing your hormones in a simple way, which is what I do because I only basically work with busy moms who have multiple kids and probably a business and like all the things. And when I work with my clients, I'm looking at the big picture. And so I say all these things like detox and minerals and gut, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have so much work to do. And the beauty of the way our bodies are made is that when you start to focus on the most important things to give your body what it needs to heal, your body can fix the problems. So it's not that you have to know every single problem. It's not that you have to like run around chasing every single problem. It's just really most of the time it comes back to nourishing your body well. So your body has the ingredients it needs to heal, essentially.
Yeah. I have a friend who's in chiropractic school right now, and she's always talking about like our bodies are like designed to heal themselves, and like the way we've been taught is almost like we need, and not that, like you said, not that medicine's wrong or bad or anything, but we don't give our bodies a chance to heal themselves. And we don't realize, like you're saying, that like there's all that it does feel overwhelming with like all the stuff that's out there. It feels like the world is against you. Our food, our chemical, the cleaners, like everything. It feels like you're just not safe. I was wondering when you said that about your hormones being off because your body doesn't feel safe. Have you found that that has anything to do with like, I feel like, dealing with trauma or like thought mindset stuff? Or is it almost like maybe even like a connect, like, I don't know, chicken and egg thing where you like, maybe the stuff you're exposed to, toxins and stuff, are causing some of the mindset stuff, or mindset things can also affect your hormones. Have you seen any of that?
Well, I think it absolutely can go both ways, to be honest. So I focus mostly on the physical, but I do have a mindset coach within my program who helps just support stress and things like that. And so, absolutely, if you have underlying traumas that have not been resolved, like that's going to be a point of not safe in your body and in your mind. And what I have found is when women are nourished and when they have what they need in their bodies and their blood sugar is balanced and their minerals are being replenished, their capacity increases to be able to deal with those things. But when you're in fight or flight mode, when you're completely depleted, when you're just like overwhelmed, burnout, and have all of these symptoms, you're not going to be able to handle, working on the trauma. Or sometimes, fixing your mindset can be one of the first pieces, but a lot of times I think it kind of has to be both things, because when your body has a sign of physical safety, it's going to be more likely to be able to change, thoughts. And I think you can go from the other way too, where you're like changing thoughts and your body is not stressed in that way. And so you have more capacity for physical healing. So I think it can be both for sure. I don't think you can, have one without the other to some extent.
It sounds like it's not fully complete, without like they probably are both need to be addressed. Okay, so I want to hear, what are some of the, like you talked about this, well, you went to it and then we didn't do it, but like how does our cycle affect our productivity? Kind of like the golden question here.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to start with just kind of going through each week of the cycle and what's happening in your body, what's happening in your brain. And I can kind of talk about like what some of your strengths and weaknesses would be in each time. So first part of your cycle, day 1 is the first day that you start to bleed. And so that's your menstrual phase. For somewhere around 5 to 7 days, your hormones are at a low level. And so your estrogen and your progesterone are going to be the ones we talk about that kind of dictate your cycle. Those are going to be at the lowest level for those first 5-ish days of your cycle. while you're bleeding. And what that means is you actually have more connection between the right and your left sides of your brain during that time where your hormones are lower. And so what that means so a lot of times physically, this might be feeling like a week that you have lower physical energy, maybe like lower social energy. So you might want to have more time to yourself. You might be feeling a little bit more tired, and our brains can work with you really well on that, because when your brain is at this part of the cycle where you're having more connection between your right and your left sides of your brain, this is a really great time for planning, and it's a really great time for analysis. So I really love, if we're talking home, business, kind of like all the things, I love to use that time of my cycle as essentially like the start of my month. So this works really well some months. It doesn't work as well some other months. So I'll just be honest about that. And if you have this as a baseline and you're like, okay, this works well for me, you can at least make it a goal. It doesn't have to be perfect, but knowing like, okay, maybe this is a time I do all of my meal planning for the month. Maybe this is where I plan out my content and my business. Maybe this is where I analyze finances or, launch numbers or whatever, like whatever you're analyzing in your home or your business. This is a really good time to just like take that essentially quiet time. Like you need to be able to be quiet and focus. And you may notice that like, okay, maybe day 1 of my cycle is not that day for me, but day 2 and 3 are really great for that. Or, you just kind of like pay attention to what works well for your body. But typically that goes along really well with the lower like social energy, lower physical energy. You can just like be still, but your brain can be working and you can be really thinking about planning. And one thing that I really love about this is when you plan your month during your menstrual phase, you are less likely to overcommit. Because when we get to ovulation here in a minute, if you're planning your month with your ovulation energy, that is your top energy and you are going to wear yourself out. So period energy is actually really, really good for planning, not because you're just going to plan nothing, but because you're going to be a little more realistic in what you commit to. And we know you can always add more, but it's sometimes really hard to take things off your plate once you've planned them or committed to them. So I really love that about week 1. Then week 2 is your follicular phase. And what that means, it's going to be about day 7 to 14 of your cycle. Everybody's cycle is a little different. I consider a really normal cycle like 28 to 31-ish days. Everybody's a little bit outside of that, but if you're at about a 28-day cycle, you're probably going to be ovulating around day 14. And so that day 7 to day 14 is kind of the week leading up to ovulation. What that means, this is really important. If you're not tracking ovulation, if you have no idea if you are ovulating when you are ovulating, that's be something to pay attention to. But ovulation is essentially like the crown jewel of the menstrual cycle. Like this is what your body is going for all the time, is to get you to the point of ovulation. So during the day 7 to 14, your body is maturing, like finishing maturing several eggs in your ovaries. And those ovaries, the eggs in your ovaries are held by these tiny little capsules called follicles. And so this is what the phase is named for. But these follicles start to grow to like really rapidly to a point where they can release an egg for ovulation. And so kind of whichever one gets the biggest, doesn't really matter what side it's on, right or left, that's going to be what is ovulated when the hormones get to their highest point. So estrogen is rising during this phase. So this is your most fertile phase. And when estrogen rises, most women notice that attention and focus increases. So women who have ADHD sometimes can really struggle during the menstrual phase and even during parts of the luteal phase when estrogen is low. And they can find that their focus is really great during the times when estrogen is higher. So when estrogen is rising in this phase, focus is good. This is if you just think about your body and just like that, your body's goal to continue the human race is always that you are fertile, right? And this is like the time of your cycle where you are the most fertile. And so you are going to be the most, like your communication is going to be the best. You're going to be the most magnetic, the most attractive, whether that's like truly physically or even just with your energy, with your voice. There was a study that I love to quote that talked about how women's voices were rated more attractive during this phase of your cycle than any other phase throughout the cycle, just by like a literal blind study of strangers listening to voices. So like someone listening to my voice while I'm ovulating versus like luteal phase, this study showed that they would consider it more attractive at this time. So it's just really, really interesting. So this is obviously like in your home, this would be a great time to commit to the bigger things that are usually harder for you typically. So maybe that's like somebody's birthday party or hosting Thanksgiving. If it perfectly lines up, wouldn't that be nice? So like things like that. But also in your marriage or in your relationship, like this is a great time for date night. You're going to be more interested in your partner. You're going to be wanting to be more engaging. And then when you're looking at your business, like this is truly a great time for everything in your business, but you can't do everything in 1 week. So just paying attention to like what is most important for you. Is it recording content? Is it, showing up for coaching calls? Is it just like knocking tasks off the list? Like whatever the most important things are for you, this is a really good time to do that, because probably if everything is okay with your hormones, your attention is going to be better. Your focus is going to be better. You're going to be more attractive and magnetic. So this is like a really great time of your cycle to do basically all the things, but definitely keep it to a realistic standard. So that's follicular phase. Then we move into ovulation. So this is all just right before you ovulate, when you are most fertile. And then during ovulation, it's kind of like the 3 to 4 days after the follicular phase, right in the middle of your cycle, where your hormones are going to stay at their highest point. Estrogen peaks, triggers another hormone called LH, and then an egg is released. And then once that happens, estrogen just drops off and progesterone takes over for the rest of the cycle. So when progesterone takes over, it kind of brings with it a very you can still be kind of like at a high point of your cycle. It's still very great with communication. And this is where I really say it kind of like is the most you in your whole cycle, where you're your best self, you're able to still communicate well, your focus and attention is still really good, but maybe you're not just like at the high of ovulation. You're just kind of like regular you, and you can really kind of slow and steady check things off the list. So this is usually a really good time for productivity. And, in any phase of your life, we like to know that. And it's still a really good time for holding meetings, whether that's in your business or whether that's like family meetings. Maybe this is a great time for a family meeting where you're not going to be all moody and crying and everything feels like a mess. So just knowing, like, typically the week or so after ovulation is really the first part of the luteal phase, which is named for the organ that produces progesterone for the rest of your cycle. But it kind of is I would say it's kind of like a slow, steady phase of your cycle. And then when you get into that last week of your cycle, that's the late luteal phase. It's days, usually like around 21 to 28 of your cycle. This is where the most women run into problems with mood, cramping, things like that. And this is a phase of your cycle. So for me, I have a really healthy, happy cycle. That doesn't mean that this week is always perfect for me. There's still some times where I'm like, feel a little snappy today, but it's like for a few hours, not for a week. Right. And so I kind of can just tell and say, okay, well, if I feel this way, then like, what do I need? That's always the question that I recommend asking, is like, what do I need? Like, what do I actually need? Am I tired? Am I hungry? Like the things you would ask your kids if they're having a fit. Those are usually the answers. And with that being said, if it's a whole week, it's 2 weeks for some women, like there is something going on in your body that needs to be addressed to be able to manage life better, to be honest. But so in a healthy, happy cycle this week, you're still going to feel a little dip in physical energy, social energy. It's essentially like your body wrapping up your cycle and getting ready for the next one. And especially if you're not pregnant, which most of us would not be at most months, then your body is saying like, okay, like no fertilized egg here, we're not having a baby, and hormones start to just gently drop off. And so what this means is typically you kind of start to go into a little bit more introspection again. This is also a really great time in your cycle for analysis, which works out perfectly because it's the end of your month. And so just looking back at, what were my plans at the beginning of the cycle? What did I accomplish during my follicular and ovulation phases when I was like really at my, top capacity? And what things still need to be wrapped up? It can feel very much like nesting vibes where you're like, I just want to like knock things off the list before the baby comes, kind of a thing. And so it's a really great time to like wrap up tasks in your business, to wrap up tasks in your home. Sometimes it's a time where you're like, I need to clean everything. Those are all very normal. Something else that is very normal for entrepreneurs is to feel like you need to burn everything down and your business is failing at this time of the month. So if you notice that on a regular basis, you should check where you are in your cycle, because I used to notice, I don't anymore, thankfully, that every single month, like 2 days before my period, I would be like, this is a disaster. Like, what am I even doing? Nothing is working. I'm quitting. Like it was like that. And actually, as I've dug into PMS and hormones, I found that there are some statistics that say women are more likely to file for divorce in this time of their cycle. They're more likely to quit their jobs, like big stuff. And not to say that that is not warranted in those cases necessarily, but it is typically the time of your cycle where you're like, I don't want to deal with anything that I don't need to deal with. And so even, and I do think that, to whatever, at a very, very minor level, that can be normal. If it's a big thing, then there's something going on with your hormones. But if you just kind of have this like low key feeling like everything's crashing down the last couple of days of your cycle, nothing's working, just give yourself a day or two, because you're probably I do think it's really helpful because your brain is most critical at this point, where you can be like, okay, what are the problems that I see? Let me write them down. And then in 2 or 3 days, let me look at them again and see like what I actually need to do about them versus just like burn down my life and move to Mexico. Right. So that's kind of how I like to look at the cycle and productivity, is just knowing that there's going to be ebbs and flows. Now, does that mean you can't ever, create content when you're about to get your period? No, it doesn't mean that. Real life, you're going to have to do it sometimes. What it does mean is if you have a launch planned and you planned it 5 months in advance, maybe look at your period cycle, because if you plan it, in your luteal phase or your menstrual phase, it's going to be harder for you. It's going to be more emotional. And if you plan it towards your ovulation phase, you're going to have a happier time. So just knowing simple things like that, where like what you can plan for and what you can control, it really can make a difference to line that up with your cycle.
Thank you for breaking that. I like how you said, like, here's the hormone part, and that means you can do this with your life. Like it means planning or analysis. Like that information is gold. And I wrote no big decisions on week 4. Do not make big decisions. Because like if we are feeling kind of, all over the place, and I think this is so empowering, because you keep ebbing and flowing with things. And like, I know that I've gone through these phases not knowing that's what was happening, and then thinking like, what is wrong with me? Or because I have ADHD, so the one where it's like really low, like it gets really hard, and you're still trying to do your business, you're still trying to work, and you don't understand what that is, and you're going, maybe I'm not cut out for entrepreneurship, maybe I can't do this. Or like when we have those big projects, like it was like an accident that it landed on, what was it, like the pre-ovulation week or whatever, where you like did something amazing, you're like, I don't know what that was. But it's like, if you don't even know why any of that's happening, it can feel chaotic. So I feel like this is so important to connect it even to the mindset that I talk about here on the podcast so much, is because if we don't know why this stuff is happening, we are feeding and believing all of these negative things about ourselves. And we're saying like, I'm just lazy, like I need to get it together, like I don't know what's going on, like you said, like my business is a total flop, maybe I didn't hear God at all. And it can go both ways. Like you said, they'll quit their job or they could quit their business. Like there's so many things. And so I feel like giving ourselves, like learning this information, listening to your podcast, learning from you, working with you, and learning how we can, because there's like a lot of us we have these things in our heart and we want to be able to do them. And knowing that there's something even as like sort of like hidden, as it were, of our hormones. Like what if the hormones are literally the thing getting in the way? And instead of like you thinking that you're just like a lazy person. So I think it's so important to bring them together, to be empowered with the knowledge, but also to give yourself grace, like you were saying. And I love how you said, like, what do I need? We don't do that a lot. And we don't say like, I need to take a nap. Like, it's okay to take a nap. If you need one, or like you said, it's basically like whatever your kids would say if they were having issues. So I love that. So when you, and you talked about this a little bit, but I'm assuming, and you said, like, you kind of alluded to this, but we're not it sounds like this would be amazing to have our lives like kind of just align with this, right? But there's life, it doesn't align that way. We have to keep working, / if we have like other disorders, other things going on, it can kind of affect these things. So what are some like ways to get started if you feel like maybe your hormones are affecting your productivity? Like what are some things people can do to like get started with that? Is there like a consult with you? Do you have some kind of freebie or quiz or something like that that can help people kind of assess if this is affecting their productivity?
Yeah, so I do have a quiz. So my quiz is going to tell you which of the top 3 hormone imbalances that I see typically you have. And I will send you, after you take the quiz, I'll send you some specific podcast episodes. So you have a like very solid place to start. That's like 5 or 6 episodes, not like 170. So I'll send that to you, the ones that will be most relevant to you based on your quiz results. So that would be a perfect place to start. That's just at my website, leishadrews.com/quiz. So start there. That's free. I also like cannot stress this enough that blood sugar balance is one of the things I pretty much always have to work on with my clients. Even if you are someone who is eating healthy and exercising and like feels like, my food can't be the issue, a lot of times you're not essentially, you're not balancing your blood sugar for multiple different reasons. So I have a mini course on blood sugar balance. It's also a podcast course. It's pretty easy to get through and listen to. And I can give you the link for that so that you can share that. But that one is a really great place to start too. And then, yeah, if you're wanting to, do a deep dive and really understand what's going on with your hormones, I do coaching, I do lab work with my coaching, but then I also have a program that you can walk through and really, get the step-by-step to make hormones well and detox hormones well, because they're the 2 things that most women are missing when it comes to having better periods and more focus and things like that. And one of the things we were talking about a little bit ago was, why does it matter so much to balance your hormones essentially? Well, when your body has that safety to have balanced hormones, essentially, if we just think of it this way, your hormones are off because your body says, hey, something is going wrong here where it is not safe for me to have a baby. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean your fertility is fully blocked, like you couldn't get pregnant. Doesn't mean you have to have trouble getting pregnant to have hormone imbalances. But if your body says, it is not safe enough, I do not have enough resources for myself and a baby right now, then your body is not going to be prioritizing fertility. And when it's not prioritizing fertility, it's not prioritizing happy hormones and good periods and things like that. So we always go back to looking at like, where is the issue with safety in the body so that we can have those foundations in place so that your hormones can be happy.
Oh, that's interesting. That makes sense though, that like something's off. I like how you put that in like that tangible kind of perspective there. Well, this has been really a great conversation. Um, and is there anything else, any final words you want to leave with listeners?
Yeah, I just want to say like hormone balance does not have to be overwhelming. It doesn't have to be hard. Is there, are there changes to be made? Absolutely, there are, but there are changes that are going to change your health and your family's health, honestly, for the long term. And so I really focus on building a lifestyle that is going to help you have happy hormones long term so that you can and I think one of my favorite things to do is just like helping women understand their bodies better. Because like I said at the beginning, like so much of the time, like the information is just kind of like muted for us because it's not deemed to be like important enough. And I cannot tell you how many women I talk to who are 30s and 40s who are like, I don't really know how my period works. Like, I actually have no idea. And it's like,